You are now about to witness the awesome, crushing might of dizzy. My head is spinning. You can call me Dr. Robinson. This show, 273, inexorably closer. Bob Riley, Stigmata, intro, all of nothing. Our bumper music from Revelation Records in Huntington Beach. Well, maybe not really. No, it is still available. They drive me crazy. They order 15 at a time from me. Oh, yeah, you selling them, Eugene? Yes, of course. That's why I can play more than 30 seconds of this song. And I have you know, this is the song that I signed the band for. Off of a demo tape. Because of these lines that Bob Riley is about to sing right now that I use to kick off every freaking show. It's specific in this case, round number 273. Listen, let the words wash over you. You know it, sing along. I'm on my way back from nowhere. But I'm taking a real good look at you. I'm taking a real good look at your face. A being paid back in full, always nothing. All right, my friends. That song for longer than maybe the intro, or maybe not. I have. Eugene, what the fuck are you wearing? Many of you have not read Along So Screw, a novel I've written. But if you had read Along So Screw, you should know that this kimono is my bloom de blue. Come in, have a seat. It's wonderful. Sit down. The most dangerous 300-pound kimono wearing man you'll meet yet. Anyway, this is round number 273. As you might have guessed from the lack of Twitter response, I did not watch the fight live last night. I was out celebrating the wife's birthday in the only way that we know how, hashtag family muscle, hashtag the Robinson way. Didn't go to sleep until 5 o'clock in the morning. Of course, because we had scheduled a bunch of stuff the next day, got up at 7:30 in the morning. So I might be a little bit under the weather. However, I feel extremely mellow, trained, and moved in a refrigerator, and then watched the fights today. In fact, I just finished watching the fights. And I know Joe House was tweeting, and I wasn't completely immune to your tweets. And he was tweeting, this drug is not working anymore because we've used the UFC as an analog for drugs and how you maybe, or how maybe socially. What do you mean, Eugene? Okay, I got to spell it out for the stupid guys. What I mean is that, all drugs are a natural corollary within you. I say, well, where's God? Well, God is within you. The drugs you take have a natural on your brain's natural chemicals. Suppress serotonin, increase serotonin, dopamine receptor. If you didn't have dopamine receptor sites, it would be like nothing. It would have no effect on you. It would be like reading French Renaissance poetry. Nothing. And what you do when you take drugs is you fuck with titration. You're dialing stuff up or you're dialing stuff down. We attach to mixed martial arts in the same way. So I find a more accurate indicator is when the fight is over, somebody says to you, how was it? And you don't look outward, you look inward. The question is not how were the fights, the question is, how do I feel after the fights? Now, I knew something was afoot because not having seen the fights, made it back from the San Francisco staycation, taking care of the refrigerator under 2 or 3 hours of sleep, roll into the Sorrel Academy. And now we have a bunch of Brazilians in-house. There were 4 or 5 there, I think. And they were happier than shit. You know, they were so excited. You watch them. Suspicious on the face of it. You know, I know a buddy who won't eat in a restaurant where they have the kitchen cutout window because he said any number of times he's looked up as he's about to take his first bite of food and he finds a cook looking at him. It's hello, and the cook is like, eat it. Yeah, eat it. As I hanging out with this Japanese chick once. Oh, kimono, Japanese. And she worked at a sushi place. And the guys that worked there hated me, you know. And she said, oh, could you make some sushi for my friend? I'm busy with this other, you know. Oh, the round guy wants some sushi, huh? More wasabi on it than I've ever tasted any. And I ate every single fucking piece, stared him in the eye the whole time. And later, so what do you think of my friend? They go, oh, yo, he's a good guy. Yes, but would a good guy flatten their tires in the parking lot afterward? I don't know if a good guy would, but sometimes good guys do. So I find a more useful question, a query to ask yourself post-fight is how do you feel after the fight? And I have to say, having just watched the fight, I feel contented. Not because nobody sold me, you know, not because of bunk, well, I was going to say bunk weed, but I'm not, you know, I'm not endorsing or not endorsing whatever your drug of choice is. I'm not saying this UFC was bunk, but going back in time, where's my tote sheet? Going back in time, as is sometimes necessary with the fight of the night first, and you go back in time through it as we, you know, look at our picks and so on. I feel okay, but I feel okay with a proviso. And the proviso is Zapruder fucking deep. These fights in total, from beginning to end, watch them all. Watch them all. And I started getting a very weird feeling. And the feeling I started to get connected to the fights was open to dispute. Keep in mind, I just finished watching them. Open to dispute. I don't know this to be the case. But I'm going to say that I think they're inching toward a formula. And the formula is not remarkably different from the Scott Coker Bellator-esque formula for fight success in the fight games. Whether or not it's successful, don't hit me with numbers and figures. I can tell you right now that Bjork Rebney is at home trying to figure out how to revivify the MMA Fighters Association. And Scott Coker is cashing checks, not breaking necks. I can't think of a better kind of bellwether of success than the fact that one guy's working and one guy's not. Now, I've been unemployed for long stretches of time, and I was still pretty successful during those long stretches, but at what is the question? So I'm gonna make a bold claim. You roll into Brazil. This is not a formula. We just saw this happen. Just like we just saw the car drive over the grassy knoll. We just saw this. You roll into a town, and now people are shouting out the towns. Vitor Belfort is shouting out Rio. Kevin Lee is shouting out Detroit. One, you shout out your town because it gets you a significant shot, and you know the packages that the video packages they make are going to be somehow significant. You may win, you may not win, but it means that you got some juice. And you've driven shit back home, you've impressed the fuck out of your high school teachers, your ex-girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever. Let's just say we're rolling to Brazil. A passel of American fighters of some minor note. Oh, you said it. Don't give me a fucking. I mean, I know I'm violating the order by going back to the beginning, but don't give me that shit. Don't give me that shit that these were not fighters of minor note. Oh, Eugene, well, I'm talking about Gareth McClellan. Who among us can forget Gareth McClellan and his fantastic fight against So you roll into town with some guys who in a rocky way, produce. And like we talked about on the last week's show, one thing you could be guaranteed: if a guy's his PVP ranking is in the first 5, is that this guy is not a regular routine a producer, can't be counted on to produce. And I'm talking about producing the mafia style. There's only one type of production we care about, and that's cash. Can't reliably be counted on to do so because this guy is fighting scared. He's, you fighters come in here, you all look different. When you leave, you all look the same. Scared. So you take a guy who realizes he's got a chance, and you take another high-profile guy who is a drag on your freaking payroll and needs to produce or shit or get off the pot. 3 choices. And you got a good matchup. And you mix in a regionalism where you can slather this card with American fighters, and you don't think this is the issue? Really? Try to isolate your audio tracks for the entire UFC Fight Night 106. Try to isolate them. It was like watching a fight in Tokyo. Have you ever done that? Ever watch a fight in Tokyo? Except in Tokyo, they are driven by politeness. It's just routine. They don't just bleed guys in Tokyo, but they're very quiet and polite. And just bleed is in kanji letters on their side, and they'll just hold it up. Just bleed us off. Skoshi skareta. Yes, I know. Yarate yarasero. This is not good Japanese. I look a little puffy. What was that thing that Chris Rock said? Not too old for the club. Not too old, just too old for the club. Hey, come on. Where you guys going? What's wrong with Eugene? So you take a Gareth McClellan, South African fighter. He's not an American fighter, but you know what I mean, a Western fighter. And you put him in the mix, and you get an undefeated guy, a guy that we might want to know about in the States. We're trying to replenish. You know what was the eeriest freaking thing in the world? Facebook was based on frosh books. If you show up at college at any time in the last 30 years, on your bed, there'd be like your ID card and this thing called a frosh book. It had pictures. You're so used to sending stuff out. You just send pictures of your name and so, mine has Gene Robinson. I don't know why. I just got so used to filling out papers. They go, do you have any nicknames? I was going to go, yeah, He-Man, Huge, Gene, all listed, Eugene, all the names that people used to call me. And I guess they figured, well, we're not going to put Eugene down there. Let's just call him, or Eugene the Jeep. That was another one. Let's just call him, just Gene. And then you go, and typically if you're a savvy guy, you look at all the hot girls, and then if you're savvy and nuts, like I was, you look at the hot girls, you go, I'm going to go talk to her. And you go across campus and go to her dorm and knock on her door and go, hi, my name is Eugene. I made a lot of friends that way. That's not the question I know, but this is just a minor point. So the Frostbook thing was pretty interesting, and I remember, like, you know, everybody I know, they kept their Frostbook. Of course, it became Facebook, Zuckerberg. But at one point, I was back at Stanford, and somebody's visiting a professor friend of mine. He's our resident fellow, and he had a Frostbook from the later year. I was like, let me see that, and I'm taking a look at it. His way. They had, you had to send in a photo with your application. I saw me 10 years after me. And so now I'm crazy, right? I go, these things are part of a public record. I could find it. So I tracked down 5 years before me. And I find me 5 years before me, 10 years after me. And I find me in each one of those Frostbooks. And when I say me, I don't mean actually me. I mean the police blotter me. You know, if you had to call in, there's a guy outside my house in the bushes with a gun, what does he look like? And you describe that person. That's the person that would appear on every other. There was, you know, like if you read the Ozzy piece that my friend Jim Blanchard wrote on, I got high and crashed the Academy Awards or crashed the Oscars. He said one thing about all those celebrities he noticed was how small they were and how incredibly large their heads were. Now you got people who are deceiving, like I have an incredibly large melon, but you can't tell because I lifted weights so that it evens out my body. So I just seem like a large person, right? That's not my point though. My point is that all these successive years, the Stanford Frostbook indicates that somebody in admissions felt a need to, like, who generally look like me. Of course, I was not the archetype. And I was trying to go back to see when, at what point they kind of go, oh, bing, and they designate the black guy architect. I remember being out on campus selling something. I was big, you know, commerce guy. I was selling a magazine I was publishing. Standing out there with a mohawk. And the president of the university at the time, Donald Kennedy, just stopped and looked at me. Looked at him, you know. How you doing, Donnie? He fucked off. It's like, come on. Well, you picked the picture. How the fuck do you think I got here? Why don't you bring more New Yorkers here so I don't feel so lonely? Anyway, my point is, when I look at Apollo Little Rubber, why would a guy name himself after a condom? Paulo Enrique Costa, you know, his name, Borrachino. He's Little Rubber. He's undefeated. He's fighting the mighty Gareth McClellan. He beats the fuck out of McClellan, and magically, we feel like we're at the intersection of hope, chance, and providence because we discover a star in the same way we discovered, you know, lightning struck thrice. We discovered a Johnny Boney Jones. But this time, this guy is called Borrachino, and he starts to feel different to me. The buildup starts to feel different to me. It starts to feel like, oh, like when they first introduced us to Vitor. In fact, he is police blotter Vitor. If you had to describe Vitor in the early days, movie star handsome, you know, quicker than shit, and that would be Borrachino. Enrique Costa, about whom I didn't give a fuck that he was an undefeated record. For me, undefeated record is cause for suspicion. The fight against Gareth McClellan, it would have been if my enjoyment of it wasn't rife with suspicion that they had hit on a Coker-esque formula to drive interest. Solution. I'm going to go into Australia, and I'm going to slather the card with non-Australians and Australians. Everybody's mother, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, high school teacher will get their seats. Affiliates will be jazzed and be talking about it. There'll be radio giveaways. All politics is local. All fight promotion is local. Pay-per-view? Okay. This wasn't pay-per-view. Fight Night 106 was not pay-per-view. The idea is to build, and they're going to build the way they're used to building. And I don't mind them building this way. I'm not complaining about this. I am just noting. Is it a work? Is it a fix? I'm not saying it's a work or it's a fix. I'm saying I'm peeking behind the curtain, and it's starting to feel like. And I'm glad that this guy has been introduced into my headspace. If he passes a drug test, I'll be really happy about it. You know, Coach Dream Crusher Sorrell described the situation with performance-enhancing drugs in Brazil as it's just medicine. They're vitamins. They have repercussions if they get caught. I'm just saying there were a few occasions on this card where I was like, don't bullshit a bullshit. Yeah, you're not going to be using performance-enhancing drugs around me and telling me it's piss or whatever that old adage. You're not going to spit on my head and tell me it's urine. How does the adage go? You're not going to spit on my head and tell me it's rain. I like my version better. So let's go back in time. Now that I've told you about the light spackling of an undercurrent of paranoia that kind of visited me relatively early on in this card. So Gastelum and Vitor Belfort. Now, both Kid Nate and I picked Gastelum, so we don't have any action in this fight. And Vitor, we again Joe Hoss and the LB watch list. He was doing the big shoulder dance right straight to the watch list. And we don't know. We don't know if this was just ginning up the fight or if he was a true believer. I suspect he was a true believer. It's like, you know, death is walking down the street, sight, smoking a cigarette. And in the background, you see like this little guy, right? And it's clear he's shadowing death. He's hiding behind a car. He's hiding behind a fire hydrant, hiding behind a tree. And then finally, he tackles death around the ankles. And the punchline is, as spoken by death, suicides. Sometimes they sneak up on you. So he has again. I mean, the guy is trying to jump his way into the Lost Battalion. He's saying bold things about what's going to happen with the fight. Gastelum, where his ranking is 10, I'm 9. You know, I'm fat. And then afterward, you guys were tweeting me or texting me, some of you, and we're saying like, look. Vitor is not in the Lost Battalion because he knows exactly where he is. He's like, I'm going to fight one more fight in Rio, and clearly I'm fucking done. I'm 39 years old. I'm done with this. I've been doing this shit since I'm 19. My sister's dead. I got caught with the trans prostitute, the hotel room allegedly. I'm finished. You don't remember that, do you? Some of us have longer memories than others. It was a nasty rumor. I don't know why it would be so nasty. What you want to do is spend some time in a hotel room with a trans prostitute. Who would begrudge you this? So he shows an incredible situational awareness post-fight. And I was just about to skate into disinterest, and then he says, he says the thing that makes my head snap around. He says there really should be, there should be, as part of this promotion, we should have a legends division. And just like Archer, where there's a black guy who's bald, muscled, and is a sex addict, and he was wearing a Star of David, I started to get a sneaking suspicion that I'm being watched. Because there wasn't so many shows back that I wrote about something called MMAARP. After Chuck Liddell was shuffled off the Golden Pond. And I got a lot of grief for it. Much like in 2007 when Navy Times, Marine Times, Air Force Times, and Military Times reviewed this book, did a 2-page piece on this fight book. And all the military hardasses wrote in and go, how dare you compare military combatants to the actions of these tattooed bald-headed thugs. And now the military is underwriting shows, and Tim Kennedy's got his own TV show. Where's my apology? Over MMAARP, which of course caused me to push back. But as luck would have it, with the remove of several years at this point, maybe whenever Chuck retired, so date it back to then. I don't remember whether I did it for Vice's Fightland or for Bloody Elbow. For now, and I'm going to go back to the Key and Peele MMA skit. Is he really crazy? Because if he is, that's not good for him or me. MMAARP, what Vitor Belfort is suggesting, is not good. It's not a feather in your cap. It's an indication Randy Couture, Tank fighting. Tyrone Woodman and trouble. You might have a problem. Ground or I climb in a tree. They don't care. Everybody loses. Oh. The Popeye. So everybody loses. If the elder division wins, everybody loses. If the elder division loses, people get in the state. Anybody, anything about themselves that's going to make them happy or do repeat business. And you got to know that. And it took me 7 years or however long it's been since Chuck Liddell has been retired to come around to that conclusion. Vitor's understandably got himself out of Lost Battalion. Is having a dark night of the soul. And it's significant. I've been lifting weights since I was 9 years old. When I hurt my back for the first time for real, like when I was 19, it was spiral depression. Because I realized that suddenly I had to my high school prom, I told my girlfriend, say, look, Hewan was her name. Hewan, look, just meet me there. We just take the subway to the prom. I'll meet you at the building. I got to work out. But I couldn't go to her house anyway because her parents would have murdered me. I was not Korean. So, at 19, I had to kind of completely redefine the parameters of who it is that I was to make my peace with the world. And it was a dark, dark time. I mean, there were lots of other reasons why it was a dark time, but if I have any number of evenings trying to figure out if I needed a dowel to put it in a trigger guard in order to shoot myself with a shotgun, or I could do it with my thumb and not miss. Active, he's being preemptive. What the fuck can I do? I don't want to own the gym. Some guys are just not good coaches. They're not interested. So much time telling me how horrible I am, because he's looking at it and watching the mistakes and going, you make up my eyes, you kill my eyes. You fuck horrible. Got it. Haven't been doing it since I was 17, and who am now 37. 20 years against 7 years, it's a big difference. So dark things come out of this. The peek behind the curtain that indicates that they're pursuing a regional strategy. They're not going big, they're going small. And they're gonna win foot skirmishes, which will give some breathing room to the big names, the showcase fellas, while maybe developing stuff along the bottom, which is local cats develop. I mean, you can't tell me they're not thinking about that with, you know, Paulo. Looks like Monty Cliff. Well, not really, but I just made that up. So anyway, let's start the end and we'll go to the beginning. The Vitor Belfort, it was probably exactly like a version of BJ Penn, Yair Rodriguez. Except for the fact that Kelvin did something that really put a nasty taste to it. He said at the end, he said, hey, how about I do a Crush the Legends tour and then fight here in Rio next, fight Anderson Silva. They boo him. You know, they say the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. And I figured that out with the Nazis. I was watching Downfall the other night. Well, I've been watching over several successive nights. For Browning, who wrote the answer book to Daniel Goldhagen's Hitler's Willing Executioners, said that he said, of course, Hitler was a deeply disturbed anti-Semite. And yeah, I agree, he was most clearly an anti-Semite, but I think you'd be mistaken in thinking that he hated the Jews. So I think he was completely indifferent to them. He was angry about the denouement of World War I. And in general was an anti-Semite. But I think indifference marked his attitude toward the Jewish population in a really significant way. The extirpation of European Jewry, he wrote about in Mein Kampf, but there were solutions afoot to ship them to Madagascar, to return them to Palestine, to do anything. Try to send them to New York. They're good. You know, we just don't want them here. And like in any corporate structure where people are trying to kiss the boss's ass, they came up with progressively more and more outlandish, more solutions until they got to the final solution. And this is where indifference with some kind of corporate estate and industrial will was a heady, dangerous combination. And in some ways more damning than hate. Anyway, I've gone a little bit far afield here. The point is that Kelvin Gastelum did not get a single cheer when he said that he was going to do a Crush the Legends tour. Who wants to see that? Figure it out that in some quarters, specifically Brazil, a guy like Anderson Silva is much loved. So you see the stars kind of harmonically converging here with this creation of a MMAARP, which I won't get credit for having named, even though you all know I named it. And a way for, you know, our most loved guys to shuffle off the buffalo. So Vitor's gonna, I mean, you can still have guys fighting good fights, but it's not gonna help. It's not gonna help to the tune of $4.2 billion. It will not help. Don Fry, see Don Fry, I'm sure Mark Coleman could use some work. Whatever happened to Mark Kerr? He's still alive, right? I mean, you still see these guys. You go post-fight pressers. Some of these guys are still Rico Rodriguez. They're still around. Tim Sylvia. One of the best things they did was to put together that video package to Where Are They Now? That's captivating TV. That's some shit you need to watch. Like they did the heavy metal one. Fascinating. Absolutely. So there are dark currents, and I don't know that the regional solution. I don't like how Scott Coker applies it and pick on. I think they leave a little bit more flex room for legitimacy in the UFC, but I don't like knowing what the intent is. I don't like, I want a little romance in my thing. Yeah. I don't want to feel like I'm part of some fucking business plan. But this is why If I Did It last week, I was like saying, "Oh, this CIA cracking and the Julian Assange really." I don't give a shit about that. Since I was at Apple in 2000, that the cameras on your devices have their own URLs. You know that there've been these cases of people getting their sextortion. Pictures of filming you in your bathroom or having sex via your camera. People watch. Hey, once that, even in the old days when there was a switchboard, Hank Williams sang about. Part of lines and knows your thing. She picks up the receiver when she knows it's my ring. Mind your own business. I mean, unless you're whispering something to somebody's ear, full on Mott Street, Little Italy, Ravenite Social Club Mafia style, you can forget about it. Stalin had it best. Two men can keep a secret if one of them is dead. So I don't know why it disturbs me that they have a regional strategy, and I could be wrong. They have to make money. It's a legitimate way maybe to make money. It's a way to drive global expansion of the brand. Why not? And like Voltron, eventually they all come together and they'll have the big fights, and these guys they'll be tuned in Australia, they'll be tuned in Detroit, they'll be tuned in Fortaleza, they'll be tuned in. Seems to be a worthwhile strategy. It seems to be a follow-on strategy to the Ultimate Fighter TV show. Unmovable feast. You go to different places. A little nervous, and that competitor of a resting place for older fighters. I'm not thinking that this is going to preach. It's going to sit well with long-term creation of a positive and healthy brand, but I could be wrong. Shogun Hua and John Vellante. John Vellante, close friends with Chris Weidman. Who? Weidman. I couldn't even get Kid Nate to pick the fight. I picked Shogun. And Shogun is another murmur from the MMAARP. And he's happy, and people there are happy, and they're going nuts. Klaus Fluoride, the bass player for the Dead Kennedys, produced a couple records that I'm on. And Klaus Floride's like 5'1". To drink at bars. He goes, I always get to bars, and inevitably I got a big mouth. Maybe somebody wants to start a fight with me. You know how I get out of the fights? I go, what's that? He goes, I step off my bar stool. And I look up at the guy and I go, I'm 5'1". What are you going to prove? I mentioned that in connection to Shogun beating John Vellante because it's John Vellante, a known associate of Chris Weidman, an ally of Quinta, and Maddie Serra, out on the island, Belmore, near Westbury. Now, I'm not saying he's a bum, but listen to the commentary. Oh, he says he knows he's supposed to go with his technique, but he just gets out there and he starts the brawl. Look at his win-loss record. strategy is writ large right here. And you know what you did? You got Shogun talking crazy. You got Shogun talking in a way that might get him on that fucking Lost Battalion watch list because he's confused about things. Take him a picture of Budgie. For those of you who don't know, Budgie is my affectionate nickname for Johnny Boney Joni, which is my affectionate nickname for Jonathan Bonesin Joneson. He's talking crazy. I mean, somebody needs to say, hey, you know, you just beat John Vellante, right? I had a guy, my friend, hey, I'm merciless. Friends of mine have pro fights or jiu-jitsu competitions. You beat a guy whose record is 0-1, you better fucking have beaten him. It's like Jake Shields told me. We were filming something for Vice. And he was Jake Shields was beating the slop out of me for his Vice article. And at the end of it, beaten from pillar to post. Got photos of he punching me in the face. It's a drag. And the photographer's assistant goes, hey, Eugene, you know, I wrestled a little bit. Can you and I go for a little bit? I was like, yeah, sure. Thinking at that time, Dave Terrell choked that guy out in the mat and left his gym bag and all the shit strewn about him. And so I take a towel, wipe my face, wipe my hands, swap out my shirt, and I'm walking back on the mat to engage with this guy. And as I'm walking out there, Jake Shields says, just loud enough for only me to hear it, and maybe some people who were in the kind of penumbra right around where my bag was. He goes, you better not lose. And in that one moment, I realized if I lose to just some photographer's assistant, that they're going to tell my mother, they're going to tell my brother, my sister, my aunt, my uncle, my high school teacher, that they're going to tell anybody who stands still long enough to be told. So when that buzzer goes off, I murk this guy. I didn't want to go hard. I didn't want to take any chances. And in the end, I realized I've just beaten up a photographer's assistant. That is John Vellante. And Shogun has taken a 100-foot cliff dive into total stupidity, meaning that he's forgotten about what happened to him against Johnny Boney Joni. Who the fuck are you going to fight? Couldn't be competitive against a Glover Teixeira, but his time has passed. I don't need him on an MMA or a P card. I don't need him on one of these regional cards because he's a name and he'll put asses in seats. Remember what Albert Speer said. And Hitler had this idea of the theory of ruin, that buildings should look as good in decline as they did when they were originally built. You don't have to be hot by 22-year-old standards, but you should be the hottest you could be at 42 or 52 or however the fucking old you are. Perfectly good 39-year-old fighter. Vitor is trying to create another division for 39-year-old fighters, which will overall be unhealthy for their brand. You got to find something for these guys to do because left to their own devices, they're going to find stuff to do that imperils your brand in special ways. Special like the Olympics. Darius or Barboza. Barboza, you know, I was calling Barboza a gift because I picked him a couple times and he disappointed me. And then I look at his win-loss record and I go twice. He disappointed me twice. Can I cut the guy a little slack? It's not that he disappointed me twice. It's how he looked when he disappointed me. It's like that song by that 50s girl group where the mother dies in a car wreck. It's just, you know how it feels. And that's bad. Whatever I felt with Barboza, I love that guy. I saw him, that spinning kick where he knocked the cat out, and I was a big fan. And then his 2 losses came after that, and you know how I felt. And that's bad. So I couldn't pick him. And Dariush, Benio Dariush, he is a friend of, not Knuckle Up, he's a friend of Ozzy. Did a big piece on him for Ozzy, OZY.com. I had to pick him. But he got fucking murked by being predictable. Flying knee, he said, oh, look, I know he was going to shoot or he's going to go down. He's been doing it the whole fight. Barboza, the guy, he's got it. He reminds me of kind of Anderson Silva. And you got the again. Let me double back briefly. Gastelum won with the amateur. True, really fucking feeling that great about it. Yeah. One time I almost stabbed somebody to death on the subway in New York. Some kids were teenagers, my age, were fucking around with some old guy, hitting his newspaper. And when he looked up, they're like, "What are you gonna do?" I said, "Come on, leave the old man alone. Leave him alone." You know, you're gonna gas them. You what? You want to build a reputation on beating old guys? Get the fuck out of here! Stop that. Why don't you fight somebody who and is back to the weight division you can't make? Come on, craft your career forward. Don't do this. You know what they did with somebody they cared about? Job in the office. Dana White liked and cared about Chuck Liddell. That's what he did. He didn't run him out there for MMA ARP. Whether or not he did it because he liked him or it was bad for the brand, I don't know. But you don't do this. It's not cute. It's not funny. Yes, Anderson Silva is still fighting. Dude's on some other shit now. Vitor has one more fight and wants to do it in Rio. Where you think you're going to let him gain some weight and his first fight back is going to be against Johnny Boney Joni, also known as Bearded and Budgie? No, it won't be. The guy wants to skate nicely gently into his good night on a golden pond and doesn't need the grief. And we don't need the grief. Darius lost, knocked the fuck out. So now I am 2 down, 2 up, 1 down. However, Kid Nate picked nobody against Shogun, and he picked Barboza, so he's 2 up. And however, I picked Borg. All right, I'm going through. I don't know why I do this. Kid Nate does it. And the Juicy De Silva, he picked. It says not Borg. Big World Boys, and now he's got his first stain from the Shogun thing. So he's got one wrong one, and I've got. Yep. So I 1, 2, 3. So in 4 picks, I have 1 wrong. In 3 picks, he's got 1 wrong. Borg fight was great. Great. Betch, we both picked Betch. But because it was a draw, nobody won. So that's just going to cancel. I think we're okay with having that be canceled. And I picked Oliveira, so I pull into the lead. And he picked Means. Good fight. And then we both blanked with Yaya. All right? That's the way it went. We just skipped over. We did not care about Kevin Lee versus Trinaldo because I really couldn't work up a fucking care for Trinaldo. I feel bad about backing out on Kevin Lee. I think he's got something. I'm talking about the Q rating something. I feel bad. I would have probably made that pick. Sergio Moraes and Davy Ramos, that was a miserable fucking fight, and it made me angry that I had to watch it. That's the kind of shit that doesn't help anybody. And we both picked Yaya, and Yaya was beaten fair and square by Joe Soto. So I win. That's a subtext. I was subtext for many. I'm looking at the tote sheet right here. You can see the little scribbly notes. So let's go through it. I picked Gaston. Yes. I picked Shogun. Yes. I picked Dariush. That's right there. I picked Borg. I picked Bet. She canceled out. I picked Oliveira. And I picked Yaya. So that's 2 against 4. Kid Nate picked Gastelum. Picked Barbosa. Picked Juicier. Right there. He picked Means right there. And he picked Yaya right there. So he's 3-2. I win. What do you win, Eugene? I win the right to sit around in a dirty bathrobe yet another day and talk about MMA. Now, yeah, I see you're texting. Some people are texting and tweeting me, and God, my leg is killing me. Come on, man. Come on. No, I'm not going to answer that now. Maybe I will. Anyway, we got 8 minutes. I got to finish this out. I don't know what the solution is, but I suspect that at the behest, and now the WME is involved in running the UFC, I think they need to find these guys something to do that doesn't include them doddering around the cage. I'm an older fighter. You would think I have sympathy, but you're not seeing my fights. You're not having to endure them. If I'm ever confused about what mat to get on when I'm competing, you know what I do? I follow the paramedics. Yeah. I mean, in rare cases, guys get better with age. Powerlifters get better with age, typically. Bodybuilders can maintain, and then they keel over because they've been taking steroids every day for 17 years straight. Mike Matarazzo, one of my favorite bodybuilders ever, had one of those terrible moments of regret after he keeled over. Like, I did this to myself. I did it. Couldn't stop. Do not do what I did. And of course, all I can remember is his posing routine to Thunderstruck with his like 25-inch biceps. I love that guy. But you have to manage the entire experience. I was watching Emma Stone, she was on. We were sitting in some Chinese restaurant, and on the TV came some celebrity. I don't know who they are at this point. Emma Stone, Eva Green, I don't know. Emma, one of the Emmas, and she's talking to some cat, some dude, maybe her boyfriend or her husband, maybe not. And they're being very cute for the cameras. They're being cute with each other, and they'd be cute for the cameras. And I kind of wanted to tell them about the whole Frosh book story. And which is to say, you do realize that 10 years ago, there was somebody on the red carpet. And 5 years ago, there was somebody on the red carpet. And 15 years ago, it's like Wicker Man. Now, there's going to be some other cute, gaming-y like girl, Gaming, Gamine, being charming. And 3 years after her, there'll be another one. I'm not saying this to say you're not special. I'm saying this to say that colors are continual frequencies. The different shades of blue, but largely the frequency that defines blue is always going to be blue. You get Paulo Little Rubber, reminds you of Vitor. That's no accident. So own the whole process from cradle to grave. The life cycle of an MMA fighter, the discovery story, the Rocky moment, the rise to the top, the stumble, the aging, the skating off into the sunset, lying in the winter, elder statesman, death. Make it work. Color commentator. I have to say, I hate Brian Stan as a color commentator, but he is not the worst color commentator. I'm talking across all sports. He does a perfectly serviceable job. I'm looking for art. He delivers the groceries. I should be fine with that. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to if I knew how to manage it, I'd be working there. If the bald one knew how to do it, he wouldn't be sitting there kind of like stumbling around the new Bruce Springsteen song, just dancing in the dark. He'd be figuring stuff out. I don't know how to, but I know that when WME owns it, we got TV commercials. George Foreman grills. People would have thought you were crazy in the 70s if I had said one day this guy will have his name attached to the #1 melted cheese sandwich grill in the world. Like, what are you fucking smoking? I do know, much like Apocalypse Now, you can't let them stay out there operating like Colonel Kurtz beyond any reasonable constraint. Start talking, and enough desperate promoters are sitting around out there, and they're like, hey, man, Herschel Walker's still fighting. Tim Sylvia starts talking, maybe I got a chance. Don Fry's like, yeah, I've been sick, but I need some money. Mark Coleman's like, why am I selling my belt? I can get back in there. I could do it. Crazy. Really? I got 2 words for you. Ken Shamrock. He fought within the last 12 months, didn't he? It's not a fucking joke. It didn't help the sport. And it didn't, more importantly, if we're using the analog of the UFC MMA as a drug, that was a bad trip. Trips don't tend to get better. But I understand the existential issues of like, suddenly now what? You're 40? You got nothing to do? Well, what can I say? Start a youth group. Nothing to do that pays. Oh, that. So, UFC Fight Night 106, I feel fine. It was good. I'm going to go brush my teeth, turn on the dishwasher, feed Popeye some meaty treats, and I'm going to repair to bed. Feeling generally content with what I saw at UFC Fight Night 106, but there are dark storm clouds gathering. And this doesn't seem like a thought-out strategy. It seems like a panic move to me. And the degree to which it succeeds is the degree to which it really pleases us. And I don't feel especially pleased, but I don't feel displeased. I'm in that indifferent spot. And we saw, you see, I'm not leaving you. You know, people, why you always bring up Nazis, man? They're the Rosetta Stone of evil. Every bad thing, that fucking shitty thing that's happened has its echoes there. Listen to Dave Emery sometime. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, we got to think of something for the elderly to do in our community. We got to. We can't have them out there driving and running into people and having heart attacks, shoveling their walks. They have to be gained. Remember they said, hey, why don't we have old people hang out with autistic kids? Old people suffer from depression, and they were, you know, these kind of cross-therapeutic communities. MMA has to do that kind of thing. Got to find something for these cats to do that doesn't include, like, I mean, Pedro Hizzo is, he's cornering some of these guys, but I also heard Pedro Hizzo had some fight recently. To be able to fight as long as they want to fight. Clearly, I'm involved in something like that myself. But I'm not making you watch it, and I'm not representing a brand. I'm not trying to be on TV. I'm not trying to use it to make my living. You have other outlets now at WME. You don't need to. Yeah, but I love it. I love fighting so much. Yeah, I got that. I got that. Do a TV commercial instead. Your family will thank you. Anyway, that's the end of the show. Knuckle Up, number 273. I'm your host, Eugene S. Robinson, with S standing for Saipan, a book by James. What was his name? Anyway, we'll see you on Tuesday for If I Did It. We'll see you later on in the week for Care Don't Care preview, because there's a fight on coming up next weekend, I believe, which is going to screw me up because I got a show with Jamie Stewart from Juju on the 19th, which is next Sunday. So I'll probably do, for those of you who tune in for Knuckle Up Live, I'll probably do it earlier in that day so I can work on my live show thing. But so there's If I Did It on Tuesday nights, unless something happened last week. My kid had an athletic awards ceremony, so I got to go to that. And then we did on Thursday, and we did Wednesday. I think this day it'll be Tuesday, Wednesday. My Twitter is unlocked, so sign on for there if you want to keep up to the date. But my Instagram is not, unless you got what? You don't get cute with me. You got to screen me. I screen you. But if you don't have photos on your Instagram thing, I assume you're a spy, and I would just ignore your request. And these are multiple ways to get a hold of me. Should be enough. You agree, you disagree. Let me know. I'll say like Kid Nate says, give me a thumbs up if you like the show. If you don't like the show, give me a thumbs up anyway. And we'll see you soon. Look what you made me do!